Hey guys, welcome back to the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast and to another unpeddling conversation that Chris and I are going to have today. Chris is coming to us today from his office, which is a little bit of a different setting. We're going to give this a try. Chris, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. And I want it duly noted, by the way, for our listeners that we're recording this episode at 7 a.m. because that's the way Chris rocks and roll. Chris, what time did you get to work today?
Well, this morning I was here at 5, which is a little bit earlier than usual because my daughter decided to get up at 4:30 and then I just got up. So
Fair enough. So you're like the late shift today, apparently, right?
yeah.
Just getting in the office at 5 a.m., sort of late shift. So anyways, this is sort of how we rock and roll it in the Windsor household. So I'm a little bit of an early bird myself. So oftentimes, I'm cracking something out at 4 a.m., a little bit strange. My customers ask me what happened, but it's become just the normal part of life. So listen, today what we want to do is explore an idea, which might sound a little bit strange when we first start to talk about it, but it's an important idea. And here's the idea we want to explore. We want to explore this idea that, hey, the power of being easy, the importance of being easy. Now, really important, not the easy you might be thinking about right now, Chris. We're not talking about that easy, but the importance of being easy, like the big easy. Why is it so important, Chris, and why is this conversation important about understanding the power of being easy when we're working with our customers?
Well, I think, and I was doing some thinking about this morning actually, kind of as we were preparing for this conversation. And, I think before we talk about, why it's so important to be easy is I think something to, make sure we address off the hop is that, this is all predicated on the fact that your product or service is within range of your other competitors, right?
Sure.
Being easy as a business doesn't make you demand 30% more for the exact same product, right? It may help you demand 3, 4, 5% for the same product, but you do have to be within spitting distance. But if you are within spitting distance, you have a similar product and it's the pricing is somewhat similar or comparable, or you can make good justification about it. I think the single most beneficial thing that we can be for our customers is easy to work with and easy to deal with. And again, easy doesn't mean being a pushover. It doesn't mean giving people everything they want. It doesn't mean that, I don't necessarily agree, and I don't think you do as well, Tim, that the customer is always right, that policy. The customer is not always right. Sometimes we need to have good-spirited conversation about how we deal with things, as we talked about in another podcast around having difficult conversations. But being easy to deal with, I think, the reason why it's so important is because at the end of the day, if we are selling commodities, which most of us are, the only thing that differentiates us is the process that, people get those commodities in. And that is how easy and enjoyable are we to deal with, and I think that's a very important thing to understand. And, in this season of COVID and a lot of businesses kind of shifting to these online, either online or curbside pickup or all these things. I think, we've had a reawakening and a re-understanding of the need of being easy to deal with as consumers, I think. So, I don't know if have you had any experiences recently, Tim, that kind of have highlighted that for you?
Oh, for sure. And before I talk about my current experience, I should talk a little bit historically. So a number of years ago, I've always believed this idea that, when you're easier to deal with, there's a power in that and there's a value in that. I think the challenge is it's often a hidden value. And that's where I think it is a responsibility as a sales professional to uncover the hidden value of being easy to deal with and really understand what that looks like. If you're not easy to deal with, that's different. But a number of years ago, I was doing some consulting work for a company, and I was working with a guy named Matt Locke, who we're going to have on the show in a couple of weeks. And Matt is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for a company, and I remember him talking to me. He was having a discovery conversation, an exploratory conversation with one of his customers. They did a lot of business with them in the U.S., and he was having an exploratory conversation with them and asked them this question, what are some of the most important qualities of a great vendor partner for you as a company? They sell through distribution, and this was one of their distributors. And the guy immediately, without hesitation, Matt said, responded, being easy to deal with. Being easy to deal with. because when you're easy to deal with, you protect my margin, which is really fascinating when you think about it. Now, there's a very astute person who's probably recognized the back-end cost of sales relationships that a lot of people don't understand. And so when Matt and I started talking about it, it really, we found ourselves, playing around with that great marketing slogan from Staples and Office Depot, the easy button. That was easy. That was easy. And recognizing, man, there is value in being easy to deal with. And so this began my journey of thinking more about this. What does it mean, and how do we uncover that value of being easy to deal with on the front end of a transaction, inside of the transaction, and maybe more particular in the back end, when there's returns or when there's things going on, how does that work? And my own experience also is shaped by the current reality that you're talking about. I've had 2 experiences recently on the retail side that again have reminded me about this. I bought something recently from a large chain entity in Canada, and they have multiple locations all over. And from a public perspective, they market to you and sort of say we're one company, so they have one flyer, but in fact they're actually an independent franchise network underneath. Independent owners, I guess, operators, not really a franchise. So although on the storefront they pretend they're all one for the quote sake of the customer, they're actually not. And for the first time, I had this strange experience where I had bought something at one of the locations, and I went back to another location to return it. And you've always been able to do that, no big deal. And I get there, and I'm told, oh, I am asked, did you buy it at this store? And I said, no, I bought it at this other location. Oh, well, we have a new policy. Because you bought it there and you're returning it here, you can't get your cash back. You can only get a store credit. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I couldn't believe it because, again, they're trying to bullshit me with marketing that says we're one. But then all of a sudden on the back end of the transaction, oh, we're not one. And I found myself really frustrated by that. And I said, you know what? If that's going to be your policy, then I might change my buying habits, because why would I put myself through that experience? Now, conversely, the other day I bought something on, that giant megalith called Amazon, who everybody hates and apparently nobody buys from, but everybody buys from. And a delightful experience. I get a product, I want to return it. I go online, I click a button, I say I want to return it, I tell the reason why, which is fair enough. Boom, immediately they deliver me a shipping label. Boom, immediately they say they're going to process my thing. I get a label, I package it up, I take it, I send it back, and boom, I got my return. I got my money. And I tell you something, that ease of dealing with on the back end of the transaction, they're super easy to deal with in the front end transaction. I can lay in my bed and click and buy, and sometimes it's at my house the next day. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, as opposed to some of that curbside stuff. What your experience on the curbside pickup side right now? What's that looking like? Is that a smooth thing for you?
Well, I know it's brutal. I'm renovating my bathroom, and so I've been having to go to some building stores to get different types of stuff, and I had to order 3 pieces of extra tile for my bathroom, and it took them 3 days to pick the product, so I couldn't go get it for 3 days. And then I had to drive there, and I had to sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes while, you call in and then you wait around for them to bring it out to you. And, like you said, I have never, before COVID, I was not really a massive Amazon guy. Not because I didn't support the concept, just because I'm a brick and mortar guy. I like going to the store. I like grabbing my stuff. Probably because I'm impulsive and I don't like waiting for it. I would rather drive half an hour to get it right away. And so, but through COVID, obviously we've used Amazon a ton more. And, same as you, I've been converted to Amazon because I live in the country and I can sometimes get stuff the next day. And it's nuts. I live in kind of the middle of nowhere. I'm 20, 30 minutes from a metro center. And so, it's just crazy. And again, going back to that whole margin and pricing conversation, I bought 2 things for our trailer last night on Amazon. I did not care about the price. I didn't do any pricing research. I just went on and bought it because I know that it's going to get to me tomorrow. And I don't really care. It's a small dollar thing. The value's small and they're easy. If there's a problem, I don't have to explain or feel bad about returning it. They'll just take it back. They don't ask me any questions. They don't make me justify why I'm returning it because they know and they view it as a long-term thing. And I think that's where, I think Simon Sinek, if I haven't read the book, but actually Matt Locke was the one who told me about it. And he has wrote this book called The Infinity Game or something like that. And anyways, the whole concept is that, we look at business as so finite sometimes, right? And so we make decisions with our customers and for our customers that it's very finite, and we don't look at it like it's a very long-term play, right? Yep. And I think that's why sometimes people struggle to make decisions that are quote unquote being easier to deal with and maybe going above and beyond in certain circumstances, because they're looking at it as an isolated situation, right? Rather than saying, what's the long-term play with this customer, and how could this action that I do today and solve that problem for them that they have no right to ask me for, how could that strategically position me in a way better position 4 years from now? I don't think a lot of people ask themselves that question. But again, going back to that whole thing, those are the things that make that business transaction uncomplicated, and people enjoy and want to come back again because they love working with you.
Absolutely. So again, if you're listening, we're introducing this concept to you, this idea of being easy to deal with, being easy, being uncomplicated, as Chris just said, which is a good way of putting it as well. And again, we've given you some examples from our sort of experiences recently and what this sounds like and looks like. So, Chris, now let's tip the conversation into, okay, let's get practical. So from a sales perspective, from a process perspective, and from an experience perspective, what does being easier to deal with look like? And let's divide up let's look at a particular experience. Let's look at on the front end of a relationship when you're prospecting and engaging a customer. Let's look at it in the early days of experience, and let's look at it on the back end of that relationship, where every once in a while there's problems, or there's a return or something, or there's a failure of a product, because product might fail and it needs to be dealt with. So let's just really quickly, let's just tour that through for our listeners. So on the front end of creating relationship and prospecting, what, from your perspective, what is being easy to deal with look like? Because I think you got to set the stage for this early, right? Mm-hmm. Being easy to deal with can't come on later. It has to be part of the thing. So what is being easy and uncomplicated, as you've said, what does it look like early on in the relationship from your perspective?
Well, I think before we get into that, I think it's really important to make sure that people understand that there's a delineation between businesses and companies doing things easy, and people and salespeople specifically doing things and dealing with them easy. So almost if we look at it like a process and a personality thing, right? Sure. And so I think in the front end, in prospecting and, going through that initial discovery phase and learning about a customer and all that kind of stuff, there's certain business processes, that people need to pay attention to for, how easy is it for a customer to actually get an account set up? What's that experience like? Is it painful and annoying and frustrating, or is it filled with gratitude and excitement? Right? And again, I think going back to things we've talked about before, being easy and people feeling that sense of, I like doing business with you because you don't complicate things, sometimes isn't even the practical things. It may even be more emotional, right? If people have to do a credit app, which all companies have, pretty much, you have to do a credit app, you have to give some credit references, you got to fill out some forms, that kind of stuff. Emotionally, that process can be very easy or very complicated, depending on who you're dealing with even. Mm-hmm. So I think so much of it comes to that. And then, salespeople, I think it's, doing things like, are you out to make sure that people are understanding the process and the things that you actually want to take them through? Are they confused by how you're going to try and onboard them? Or do they understand an overarching arc of what you're trying to do and where you want to go? Like, are you giving people a pathway of how this thing goes, or are you creating confusion, right? I think all of those things, those underlying currents early on in the process, I think are very important. And like I said, I think that's more of an emotional thing than anything practical, actually.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. In the early days, you're setting that tone of what being easy to deal with is going to be, or being uncomplicated. And you know what? I think part of also being easy and uncomplicated in our relationships it's again how we flex to the customer, how we mold to the customer. And when I say flex to the customer, I'm talking again about giving everything up for the customer and becoming something that we're not. But again, our flexibility, our ability to flex to their needs, to their language, for instance, all of this is setting a stage of what being flexible, and it creates a sense of ease. And maybe if we change the word for a second from easy to deal with, just the ease of engaging with somebody. And if we can set a person at ease, this feeling of being easy to deal with and setting a person at ease in the process, I think is so powerful. And it is an emotion, because the opposite of setting a person at ease is really that nervousness and fear that comes in. So when we set a customer at ease with us, with our team, with our company, with our products, with our processes, all of a sudden I think what happens is it dials down that buying anxiety, because there is a certain anxiety in the process when you think about it, because there's a wrestling that happens, there's negotiation that happens, there's that has conflict and tension within it by virtue of negotiating a deal. And so if we can set a customer at ease with the way we deal with them, the way we speak with them, the process we use, on a personal level, and as you said, on a personality level, but then on the process level, I think what I would encourage our listeners to do is just, do an inventory. As you listen to this, and maybe after the podcast, do an inventory. Ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how easy are you to deal with? Do you set customers at ease? And then start with you personally, and then look at your processes. Look at the processes, that how you onboard a customer, that initial thing, how easy, as just Chris said, how easy are those processes? And if we just tweak our processes a little bit, maybe again, think about the credit app for a second. Maybe the credit app has to have certain information, but maybe again the formatting and the way we do it, and whether it feels like this sort of antiquated bank document, or if it feels fresh and alive, maybe even that starts to create a sense of easiness and sets a customer at ease. And just so analyze not only your personal processes with a customer, but start analyzing the processes that you bring a customer through on that onboarding, the beginning days. How easy is it? How complicated it is? Even about like getting a hold of you sometimes. Getting a hold of somebody sometimes it's complicated, particularly when you call in and you can't get through or you can't figure it out. That's complicated.
Yeah. Well, I think too, I know, one thing that you talk about a lot is, that pendulum. In the beginning of a sales relationship, tension is high and trust is low, right? And I think as we create easiness and comfortability in those relationships, you begin to tip that scale, right? When you're easy to deal with, trust increases, right? And again, that's so key in the beginning stages of engaging a partner in any way, shape, or form, or even long-term relationships. Being able to create and sustain trust and reduce tension is a recipe for success. And I think that's very important to remember as well. And as you said, on an example like a credit app, I remember I was reading a story about just a sales example kind of around this, and they were saying that there was this company who they had like this really complicated RFQ bid process. I can't remember what the product was, but they were having a hard time getting customers to fill out certain information on the RFQ or something like that. And their team, their clerical team, was like, well, we're not filling it out. It's not our job to fill it out. It's the customer's job to fill it out. And I remember this guy asked them, he said, well, do we have the information to fill it out? And they said, well, yeah, but it's not our job to do that. The customer should be doing that. And again, that person who's saying the customer should be doing that is probably 100% right. But when we take a step back, I think analyzing some of those things to say, it's not about necessarily being right in this situation. Do we want to be rich? Do we want to differentiate ourselves in that RFQ process? Do we want to go first? Right? And again, I think it's so interesting when you make these little decisions about how you deal with customers and what you do for them. It's not about doing things that cost a lot of money, that are easy, that make you easy to deal with. It's not about giving the people the best pricing. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about these little things that come up randomly that you're challenged with, and you're at a bit of a fork in the road to say, okay, do I deviate from policy to be easy, or do I dig my heels in? Right? Yeah. And I would say 90% of the time, if it's a good partner, I deviate from policy.
Right. No, and it makes a lot of sense as you talk about that. And it's interesting because, as a consultant for myself for many, many years and working with different customers in different chains, part of the chain or the value chain within a distribution network. It is interesting because I've been a fly on the wall in lots of different conversations, and I know I was in a conversation recently where a wholesale distributor that I do work with was talking about one of the vendors they work with, so a company they buy product from and sell, and they were struggling with some processes. There was some product challenges, and there were some problems that needed to be dealt with. And when we were talking about it, it was very clear that everybody in the company thinks that this particular vendor is just horrible to deal with on the back end. It's complicated, it's frustrating. This particular partner has like this special reward or points program, which is supposed to be such a benefit, but it's so complicated, it's so convoluted that this customer is like, screw it, it's of no value to us. Who cares? So here's a company who's designed this thing that they think is such a motivator, this points program, and you can earn all this stuff. But the process of tracking points and redeeming them is so difficult that this customer thinks the thing that vendor thinks is their benefit is actually not a benefit at all. And I think, again, this goes back to, as a person and as a company, we've got to analyze. Sometimes we have the best intentions. So we start with saying, let's do something that's so positively motivating, like a points program. But then the collection process is so cumbersome that you get no value, and you get negative value from something that should be giving you positive value. And so, again, I would just challenge you, if you're listening today, analyze your processes, analyze the experience. Sometimes the very thing that you think is a motivator is a demotivator if you're not careful. And you don't have to redesign everything from scratch, but you have to, experience it from the user's perspective. And I think that's another thing, Chris, that we don't often do. We develop these systems, and then we don't sit back and objectively get feedback and look at it with beginner's mind. What does this process feel like? Because when we design a process, we think it's perfect. But if the user thinks it's shitty, then maybe we need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, there can be an attitude that seeps into different parts of the organization that are very different from each other in terms of what easy or what reasonable looks like. And I think that's where, this isn't really a sales conversation. This is actually a business culture conversation, I would argue. Because if quality, engineering, sales, marketing, shipping, receiving, customer service, finance, accounts receivable, if they don't all have a similar understanding of who we want to be to our customers from an ease standpoint, I think that's where you get off the rails, is that a customer might deal with my sales team initially, right? And they either have a great experience or not a great experience. Hopefully they have a great experience that's easy to deal with. They're excited to get going, all these great things. And then, for example, I know our QA manager would never do this because he's a fantastic person, and we're very aligned on this, but it's like then we have a quality problem, and our QA manager sometimes may want to dig his heels in just because he feels like the customer's trying to shyster us, right? And again, it's balancing all those things where it's like, okay, we have to take a step back and say, what's the long game here, right? Do we want to dig our heels in for $1,000? Or do we want to realize that this is a $400,000 customer that we need to have a conversation with about this, but maybe we take a different approach, right? Yeah. And I think it's asking those questions and exploring, how could we overcome this for the customer? How could we help if we can? right?
Right.
I think that's very important posture to have.
It's a great question. And so again, if you're listening today, ask yourself a question. How easy am I to deal with? How easy are we to deal with? In every department. It's a great question. Go back to the Amazon experience. The one thing again about Amazon, and so the other day I was going to return something and had a question, and again I went on the app and you answer a couple questions, and then you basically click a button and boom, it connects you to the right person. You don't have to find the number. You don't have to figure it out. And I thought, man, that again is so easy. It's easy for us to deal with, and yet. If you compare that a lot of times to some experiences, so we onboard a customer, right? And how easy is it for them to get in touch with the right people when they have a question? Again, if they have an accounting question, how easy is it for them to get a hold of the right person? Do they have the right number? Do they have a clear channel towards, again, they have a problem with a product, they need technical support. They have a problem with a product, they need to do a return. How complicated is that process, and particularly when people want to get a hold of somebody? Do they know the right place to call, the right email to because a lot of times what happens is that we don't figure it out with a customer till there's a problem. And they call in and they get pushed from person to person to person, and then they're pissed. And that is a problem. That is not being easy to deal with. And this is what I've always said to customers. Again, although you'd never want to have this discussion, I think, or you don't think you do up front, when you're defining expectations in a relationship, I think you ought to be talking up front about, okay, how are we going to deal with a problem? So just want, again, no salesperson wants to talk about quality problems in a sale. But in that relationship, we should be talking about the value of the relationship. And hey, by the way, Chris, if we do have a problem, or if there's a product a problem, here is the easiest way for us to work together. Here's this number, here's this, here, whatever, and outlining that in advance and being clear about that. Because then there's a clear pathway to dealing with it. Because what happens is people get frustrated. If it's a distribution network like you have, they get a complaint from a customer. The guy comes in, brings a product back that he bought from a wholesale distributor that you sell to. They're enraged, of course, because they're frustrated. And so now all of a sudden the person has got this anxiety, and emotionally they're charged. And now he's like, I can't figure out how to get to the right person at this company to fix this problem. And now frustration's growing and growing, and we're not easy to deal with. Yeah. If we're easy to deal with, all of a sudden, again, we dial down that anxiety, that angst. We create a sense of ease, and that sense of ease is a powerful force for bringing greater trust, bringing an equilibrium and a calmness to a problem. And again, so how easy are you to deal with on the front end, in the middle, and on the opposite end of the transaction? How easy are your processes that you design, that you think are so amazing? Your web processes, your forms on your website, all this stuff. Think about how easy is it for the customer to actually engage with you. It's a very, very important question, and we want to challenge you with it today. Chris, any final thoughts on this sort of this subject? I mean, again, we just want to really poke people in the eye this morning and ask them this question and really get them to think honestly, are they easy enough to deal with?
Well, I think another really important thing that I believe is very key to keep our eyes on is that, again, looking at being easy or uncomplicated to deal with as a business value, over a sales value. I think this is where the rubber really meets the road, is that, we have to balance the tension of efficiencies and customer delight and ease, right? So, because again, it's like, we're having, we have conversations about, we're having lots of homeowner calls, for example, right? Of people needing stuff from us and needing part numbers, and we don't sell to homeowners, right? So we're dealing with our customer's customer in some case, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we're getting a lot of calls, and it's like, okay, that's taking up a lot of time. And so there's ways to be more efficient, right? We could say, well, we're just going to take the phone number completely off of a website and have no way for people to get in contact with us at all. That will be much more efficient, which is 100% true. But will it create customer delight and easiness of dealing with us in our products after sale, right? And again, there's always a hybrid model. of efficient and ease, and making sure there's clarity around those things. But again, it's like we have to balance that fact of it's not all about being efficient, right? Will we sacrifice, and this is where it's important to look at it as a business value. Will we sacrifice efficiency for customer delight? Right? And actually challenging ourselves with that question, right? Will we sacrifice efficiency for customer delight? And I think the companies who choose to find and wrestle to find the middle ground are the ones who are way more successful down the line. Again, it's not about being inefficient.
Yep.
And only focusing on customer delight, because inefficiencies will then create the opposite down the road. But we do have to walk that tightrope to say, how do we find the most efficient way to cause the most customer delight and easiness in the process? And I think that is very important to remember as well.
You know what? It's a great analogy, and as you're talking, Chris, I'm sort of seeing these axes in my mind. On the one side, on the x-axis, we've got customer ease or customer delight. On this axis, we have organizational efficiency, and finding that apex. Where, again, if we think of this sort of upward line with a curve and then maybe a downwards trend, if we think of that graph thing, finding the apex where we get maximum ease with maximum efficiency and finding that on that chart is really critical. And so as you describe it, that's sort of what I see, that mental picture in my mind. And again, sometimes we might give up a little bit of efficiency, internal efficiency, or what seems better. Maybe when we'll say internal ease, easier for us, when it's the perfect X marks the spot is when it's maximum easy for us and maximum easy for the customer. That's what we're obviously going for. When you can't ride that tension, then are you pulling towards it's got to be easier for us as opposed to the customer, or are you pushing towards let's make it a little easier for the customer and let's give a little bit on our end? And it's a great question. So again, as you're listening to this discussion, think about this for a second. Think about this. Make a chart. Grab a piece of paper, grab your iPad, make a chart and ask yourself, maximum ease to deal with, maximum efficiency. Oh, and by the way, if you're brave enough, maybe you should ask your customers. Because you know what? You might think you're super easy to deal with. Like the company I talked about who designs a points program that they think is so amazing. And what they don't realize in the back end that all their customers think it's shitty and they're complaining about it, but they never tell them. They never interact. So again, maybe the question is, how easy are you to deal with, you think, from a customer perspective? Maybe ask some of your customers. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really easy, that helps you maintain your profitability through the transaction and everything else. Where would you rate us? And maybe that would be a great little study, or just call some customers, call some people you know well who will be honest with you and get a sense of that. And then challenge yourself to be a little bit easier. And what would it look like? Maintaining that balance between easy for you and easy for them. And if you can find that equilibrium, that's a powerful thing. Because the reality is, in a lot of the places that I consult, and of course the world you work in, when we're selling through distribution, for instance, and you've made this comment before, our customers are not buying our product, they're buying the margin spread in our product. And a lot of customers don't think about this. If they've bought a 40% or 50% margin spread in the cost of acquisition and the sale price, that lack of being easy to deal with on the opposite end actually erodes that margin, and they never even think about it. So what happens is they beat you up for an extra 5 points or 2 points or 3 points or 1 point on the front end, but you could be 10 points less efficient and easy to deal with on the back end, but they never account for it. So this is a big part of it, that we add value to the customer by being easy to deal with, whether it's in a retail situation, whether it's in a wholesale distribution situation. There is power and value in being easy to deal with. All of us needs an easy button. And I hope I'm not, in copyright infringement. I want to make sure that that is off the Staples, I think, and Staples in Canada. They have a powerful marketing idea, easy button. But here's the thing is, if the marketing department just says you have an easy button, but you really don't, that's just baffling people with bullshit. The question before all of us today is, do you and your company and your process really have an easy button? and what's the value to you and to your customers you do that. Chris, as we wrap up today, what's your final word of encouragement for people to consider? I think it's a great conversation. It's fascinating, and there's opportunity for people to do some work after this conversation.
Well, I think just as you were talking again there, I think just for people to remember that, redefining what the term efficiency actually gets us. Are we trying to be efficient operationally, or just operationally, or are we trying to be efficient at creating a customer delight experience? And I think that's where, when you look at Amazon is one of the most operationally efficient companies in the world, but they're operationally efficient for the sake of their customers' delight. And I think that is a huge point for us to focus on, and operational people to pay attention to. Understand that efficiency is not just about operational efficiency. It's about efficiency for the sake of customer ease and customer delight. And I think that's a very important thing to pay attention to.
Absolutely powerful idea. Listen, guys, thanks for listening in today. And as you sort of push this conversation out into your real world, do us a favor. Do me a favor. Email me at tim@UNCOMMODiFiED, or come on social media and let Chris and I know how you're unpeddling your world, how you're adding more value and becoming easier to deal with and more efficient for the sake of your customer. The front end of the transaction, in the middle, and on the end of your customer engagement. Thanks for listening, and have an excellent day.